Okay, so today we are going to talk about software testing and especially software testing according the requirements that we have in the IEC 62304, okay, namely the requirements that we have at chapter 5 of the IEC 62304, unit testing, integration testing, and software system testing. My name is Cyril Michaud. I'm working at MD101, and I will be presenting this webinar with Tilman. Tilman, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much. Hi, I'm Tilman Schlenker. I'm the CTO of Matrix. And I'm very glad that Cyril is willing to do this demonstration today, and I'll show some implementation details to give a bit of context based on how we do these things in Matrix.
Thank you, Tilman. So we are going to start with a presentation of matrix requirement. I leave you that to you, Tilman.
I thought you would do that as well. Oh, thank you. So Matrix Requirements is a company specialized in ALM and QMS systems. We were founded in 2015 by two former medical device developers who saw a need for tools to help with the requirements management, the whole application lifecycle management, test management, and also quality management for medical devices. And basically built a tool that would solve their own problems and then put that out into the market to help medical device companies to certify their products in the end without too much overhead in their development production. Our focus is on SAMD and SIMD products, so basically software as a medical device, pure software medical devices, and software in medical devices. So, for example, embedded development or components in a medical device. Our goal is to help with the requirements management and the test management that you have to do to get your product certified, and also to help you set up quality management systems that you need to be certified as well. So our product is certified for 13485, 27001, and 21 Part 11. So with a big focus on MDR and on FDA certified devices or approved devices. We have over 200 customers all over the world, with a big focus on Europe, obviously, because we started in Belgium, but also now with a couple of customers in the US and in a few other places, as you can see on the map. So with that, back to you, Cyril.
Thank you, Tilman. So going forward with the presentation of MD101. So MD101, we are a consulting company with the following areas of expertise that you can see on the screen. So mainly we're working in quality assurance and regulatory affairs, as well as clinical strategy and reimbursement strategy. That means that we can follow up companies, okay, medical device manufacturers, throughout the life cycle of their devices. First, of course, and this is the biggest part of our activity, we operate on consulting before CE marking the devices, before FDA clearance of devices, but we also operate after the regulatory approvals, okay, especially for market access, for reimbursement strategies. So we are also a bit focused on software, which represent almost 50% of our turnover, and 50% of our activities, be it SAMD or SIMD in medical devices. Medical device software represent more than 50% of our activity. And of course, we update our consulting activities with all the subjects which are the most important subjects of the currently addressed by manufacturers, to start with cybersecurity, where we can offer services on secure design, threat model, secure testing, all activities related to the secure SDLC, as well as artificial intelligence, like good machine learning practices and machine learning algorithm validation, verification and validation. So that said, we are today going to focus on software testing, which is in fact a bit of the IEC 62304, because here you can see a graphical representation of the processes that we find in IEC 62304. And in these processes, we have the software development process, okay, here, and we are going to focus within the software development process on software testing. Okay, so if we zoom on this process, the software development process, we can represent the software development process like this. Okay, so you retrieve all the steps that we have in software development of IEC 62304. Okay, software requirement specification, architectural design, detailed design. This is not the topic of today. So the topic of today will be the right arm of the V-cycle, namely software unit test, integration test, and verification test. And we will see throughout this presentation how we can manage to document and store evidence of IEC 62304 conformity with Matrix Req functionalities. So we start first with unit test. So the bottom of the V-cycle. Okay, so this part, software unit test, something that you have to address in class B and class C. Okay, and software unit test, in fact, you are going to retrieve a pattern. Okay, that you retrieve in fact in unit test, integration test, and software system testing. First thing, we plan. We plan what we are going to test. Okay, what kind of test we are going to plan. Establishing a procedure to verify software units, says the IEC 62304, something which can be quite vague, okay, and that we have to adapt to the technologies that you have actually into your development tools, into your tool chain, into your product. Okay, so we plan something, we review it. Okay, step 2. Okay, so we evaluate the test procedures for adequacy. We will see how we can do it for unit test. Then, when the plan is done and reviewed, we execute the tests, we document the results, and then we review the results. Results are records like others. Okay, so we review the results to be sure that the results are bring evidence of that the unit tests are executed and done as planned. Okay. So that said, we can have several methods to perform unit testing. We can retrieve, and this is probably just a subset of what we can find in all the technologies that we have. Okay. Of course, we think at first about automated unit tests. Okay. If you use a framework like CPP unit, JUnit, or any kind of unit testing framework that you can have in your system, that will be part of software unit testing. And here, planning the test, in fact, is writing some source code. Okay, when you plan the test, you write source code, and the execution of tests will be performed automatically with the test engine, and then the human is going to review the test results from this automated test engine. Code reviews, manual code reviews, can be a kind of low-level unit test. Okay, so manual code reviews, which means in fact reviewing the code in a way that static code analysis robots can't do. Okay, reviewing the efficiency of the code, reviewing the fact that an algorithm is well implemented. Okay, your static source code analysis tool can't do that. Okay, so we still need code reviews. And manual code reviews can be, for example, the result of pull requests that you have in your CI/CD. Static code analysis, of course, we talked about that. So here, for code reviews on static code analysis, in fact, planning, meaning that you are going to write in your software development plan, okay, planning in your software development plan, you are going to write the fact that you are going to use these test methods into your systems, okay. And of course, at last, we, of course, will retrieve the manual unit test, okay? When we cannot do otherwise, we can still have manual unit tests. That will be, for example, the case with embedded systems where you have to activate some actuators, some sensors to verify that some unitary functions are performing as expected into your embedded systems, for example. Okay. And this is not in the standard, but this is something state of the art, I would say, or a rule of thumb. Okay, the combinations of methods is recommended. Okay, in order to demonstrate an appropriate test strategy at the low level of the testing strategy. In fact. And especially that combination of method is also recommended if you want to address the additional acceptance criteria found in Class C in section 554 of the standard. Okay. So you see several methods which bring several kind of documents and records, okay, especially that can be brought by your CI/CD for some of them, that can be brought by manually, in fact, for some others, okay? And here we see here the methods, and we are going to see with Tillman how we can draw the link, or how we can bind these several methods into the system of matrix requirements, okay? With, in fact, how we can record all of that, all of these activities into matrix requirements. And this is something, Tillman, you are going to show us. And for that, I have to let you share your screen.
Thank you. Okay, let me just get rid of this Zoom bar. Okay, you should be able to see my Chrome browser. So I'm going to start at the beginning. So this is basically I'll try to make this the practical bit of this presentation. So as Cyril already showed in the presentation, the whole system is actually broken down into different layers. So starting at the top with the design, and then depending on the criticality of the software, the need to test thoroughly, it goes down into more and more depth by decomposing the system into parts. And testing happens on all of these different layers. So you would start by testing design assumptions, and you would go down and up to the point where you test the smallest component of the overall system. That could be just an algorithm or a physical component, something like this. And the key here is that you need to track this relationship between what is expected of the whole system or a component and the actual test coverage that you're performing. And this is called traceability. The diagram that I'm showing here, this is a demo project we're using. And this diagram basically shows the traceability of this demo project. Won't go into too much detail, but the main important concept here is that you actually track what relates to what other parts of the system. Like how is it decomposed and how is it covered by tests? That's the important thing to keep in mind here. Okay, I'll do a quick overview. And this will be different in different systems. Matrix uses a hierarchical display of all of these components. So things can be grouped logically. and it uses traceability as kind of a second layer that you can view on these items. There are other systems that do this differently. The important thing is that all of these items are tracked in a controlled fashion with version control and explicit linking between them. So later on, you can do reports and you can make sure that things are actually consistent in the system. And you will have to generate reports that prove this consistency. That's a really important part here. In the end, what's important to keep in mind is what you deliver at the end of the project when you want to get approval for your products is going to be some form of documentation. This might seem very archaic, but basically what you're going to create is a bunch of PDFs in most cases that contain enough information that whoever reviews it can be sure that what you did is actually complete and consistent. So even though things are broken down here, in the end, they have to be put together again in a consistent whole. You cannot send your whole database to the auditors for review. In most cases, you'll have to break it down into something like a PDF. And often projects start with a Word document or Confluence pages. And at some point, because you can't manage 10 pages of information in one flow, you have to do this breakdown and this traceability to make sure that things are actually correct. If you don't make a change in the requirements, for example, you have to make sure that the testing for those requirements change as well. And that's why you need something that is more complex than a Word document to do this tracking. Okay, so this project is fairly complex. I'll quickly start with the design input just so you get a general idea. So this is a demo project that we use for this type of project size. It starts with use cases, breaks things down into user requirements, regulatory requirements, actually also an input for your planning and your specifications. And as you can see here, and I'll start with a bit of a bigger item. So as you can see here, that's a product requirement that was created. It's based on some user requirements and some hazard analysis or risk analysis that was done. So this is a product requirement that is trying to cover, well, it's trying to mitigate a risk of inaccurate measurement in this case, and it's trying to fulfill a user requirement for the product. And it links to a verification that is used to verify that this is actually correctly implemented. And there's also a list of components. So this is the breakdown that implement this product requirement. And there's a specification. So you can already see there's a pretty complex graph in here of data that you're tracking. And this makes the linkage between these items explicit. So later on, you can do a report, for example, based on this. And if we go in here, for example, for the verification, you can see this is a very simple test, user-oriented in this case, because that's the easiest to demo. With a test description, some test steps, and the expected results. It's actually covering multiple product requirements, so it's covering aspects of multiple product requirements. And you can get an overview over this by using a dashboard. So this is the kind of thing you can then do if you have a proper traceability. So this is an overview over the project, starting here at these specifications and requirements. And it's basically checking if these have been covered by verification tests, because in this case, we also have use cases in there. There's also validation tests. But basically, what the system helps you to do is to find gaps. Because one of the common things you'll do in the project is you'll find out there's a different requirement or different use case that you need to cover, or you added a new component to the system and you forget to link it up with test cases. And what a traceability helps you to do is to make sure that everything is actually covered by test cases. So later on, if you run all your test cases, you know that you actually covered all of these requirements as well. Of course, the content is still up to you. You still need to make sure that technically these test cases do cover what they're supposed to cover, but just having this linkage between the items helps you to make sure this is actually the case and makes it easier to track these things. What the system also does is it tracks the age or the versioning of things that derive or cover other items. So for example, here you can see there's an icon to show that this item is no longer up to date, potentially. And if I look at the traceability, I can see that the hazard this relates to was actually changed. So somebody made a modification to this after the requirement was defined. So if you know exactly what was changed, then you can simply click on there and say, okay, I know, this is fine. But if somebody else made that change and you're responsible for making sure the requirements are actually consistent, then you can go in here, use that information, go up to the other item, do a review, and see if they still match. If they do, then you can reset that flag to make it clear that this is up to date. All right, give me a sec. So again, this is important. This doesn't seem to have anything to do necessarily directly with the testing, but you can only produce a complete test output if you can actually track what part of your system you're covering with tests. Because if you execute all your tests, but your tests actually don't cover the whole system, then your tests are basically useless, or at least they're not consistent. They won't help you get your product certified in the end. Going back to the documentation, so what you do in the end is, so I'm just going to switch back to the other project. You will want to make sure that when you want to release a product and you're going into a testing cycle, that you can get an overview over this test coverage, and that you can get an overview over the test execution to make sure that tests actually ran. And in a very simple way, the output at the end will look something like this. And the complexity really depends on the criticality of your product. Is it class A, B, C, etc. The requirements will change based on this and the level of detail that you have to follow. But generally, I've just set up a new test plan for my testers or for my testing system. And what you can see here is that it traces down from, specifically in this case, from all the product requirements that I identified that I want tested, down to test executions. And this is done internally via the traceability. That's important to keep in mind. So it will take all of the product requirements that I want to test, and it will check that each one of them is covered by tests and that there are test executions for this. And if I look at that plan, I'll see that each one of them is actually covered. The tests haven't been started yet. I can also do another type of report, but that's the kind of output that I need to give. And if I add a new product requirement, just for demo here, and then I go back to this report and run this again, what I will see that I have a new line item here for the product requirements, and I'll see that it's actually not covered, and there has been no test runs. There could also be the case that I actually have test cases defined for this, a verification plan for this, but it has never been run, then I would get the same kind of information. So this is the whole intention here, is to make sure that whatever you're producing as documentation, in addition to just creating the code of the product, stays consistent with the changes that you put into your product. Because in most cases, you won't make a simple plan, then implement everything, and in the end, just do the testing. while you do the implementation, things will change. And so you have to make sure you have a system that allows you to stay consistent. So if you realize after one increment that maybe a validity check you have in your software doesn't work as intended, then you need to go back to the requirements and the specification, update it there. And if you do that, you want to make sure that the tests actually cover this new functionality. This was just a very rough introduction. I'll get into more about the specifics for the testing, but for now, I'll give it back to Cyril.
Thank you, Tillman. So you see here how useful it can be to have traceability into the data model of Matrix Req, because as we said, at the low level, you can have the traceability between the components and the test execution. Okay, so the test, the components and the test cases named VER, okay, VER, into the demo project that Tillman showed. And also we can also have the traceability to the test execution. So from that, thanks to that traceability, we are able to show that we have the appropriate test coverage of unit tests and of software units as it is required by the IEC 62444 for Class B and C. If we continue, in fact, with the requirements at higher level, at integration level and software system level, we retrieve the pattern I showed you, okay? Planning, reviewing the plan, executing the test, documenting the results, reviewing the results. We retrieve exactly the same pattern here in the software integration and software system testing, okay? So here the language used by the standard is a bit different, but the behind the scenes, it remains the same principles, okay? Defining test procedures, okay? So the VER items that we have in Matrix, okay? With the objective acceptance criteria. With one remark, however, is that for software system test, okay, section 5.7 of the IEC 62444, we need traceability with software requirements, okay, which were named ProdRec into the demo project, okay. We could also have for integration testing, we could also retrieve either a traceability with software requirements, product requirements related to the interfaces of the product, or also this is a way to implement the evidence of the standard, but the standards doesn't require to do it, okay? Either traceability to requirements on software interfaces or traceability to components implementing the interfaces. This is what you can have as an evidence of software integration coverage, okay, test coverage. And then for software system testing, okay, we need, and this is mandatory, this is required by the IEC 62444 for every class, A, B, C, we need traceability and coverage of all software requirements by software test cases, okay. And of course, by software test execution. Okay, so we define the test procedures, we review them, okay, the test procedures. By the way, we have a workflow of review in Matrix Req, okay. Just a tiny bit of configuration management. Of course, if we have changes in the software, the standard tells us that we have to retest after changes, okay. This is why actually we have the XTC items into the Matrix Req model, okay. It's a way to be sure that we have the appropriate test execution of the test cases, okay? So defining, reviewing, retesting after changes, which means that we can add additional tests also, okay? And then running the tests, okay, according to the test plan, recording the results, okay? So that will be, in fact, the XTC items, which will be the records of results, okay, with the requirements quite prescriptive of the standard. The standard is quite prescriptive here. We have to define the results with something like passed, failed, not run, for example, something objective. the list of anomalies attached to each test case, the data sets used, okay, and the identification of the tester who performed the test, okay. This is, and we need also to review these test results to be sure that what has been recorded here in the test results, we review it to be sure that it is first aligned with the content of the test plan, of course, and also compliant to the standard requirements. Okay. So I talked about the traceability between software requirements and software test cases, okay, name software system test procedures in the standard. The standard also mentions requires, this is mandatory, the traceability between software requirements and software system test results, okay. Usually, okay, we retrieve the traceability between requirements and test results by transitivity, because we have traceability between requirements and test cases, then test cases and test results. This is actually what we have in Matrix Req. ProdReq, product requirements, VER, the test case, the test cases, and then XTC, the test results. Okay. One remark also, we have to prove that the test meets the pass-fail criteria. What does it mean, that requirement of the IEC 2304? It means that if the tester marked the test as okay, it is actually okay. Okay. This is less important, but when the test is failed, it is actually failed. Okay, less important, but a false negative is of less consequences than a false positive. It means that we need to bring evidence with raw data that when a test is passed, it is actually passed. Okay, so we can bring evidence with raw data that can be screenshots, photos, log files, whatever. It will depend, of course, of the test cases that you have. Okay, and of course, this raw data, these evidences also can be recorded into the XTC results of Matrix Req, either in the system itself or with links to some external data when the data are too heavy, for example. And so I'm going to give the hand to Tillman to show you the rest of the demo, giving you a presentation, a more live presentation of these theoretical requirements.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I obviously won't be able to cover all the cases. What I'll do here, just because that's the way this project is set up, is I'll focus on the manual testing that's easiest to demo. A bit of a longer side note, because this comes up very often. If you do automated tests as part of your regular builds, so the typical case would be unit tests that you run as part of your code when you build a new build of your software, automated UI tests, static code analysis, all these kinds of things. They're typically run every night or every build or every change, which is very important for an efficient development process, because the sooner you find these potential bugs, the better, because you can immediately fix them. And this is where this also basically relates to Matrix, because or really any kind of test database that you want to use for reporting later on. It's the information that a build failed overnight because somebody checked in a code change is actually not important for the reporting at the end. What's important is when you've decided that you have a release done where everyone thinks the code is complete and functional. When you do a test, then that's where you get the important results, because it's going to prove that this specific release that you actually want to hand out to customers is actually covered by tests, or has a bug, which is also absolutely fine. So basically, that's to say, in your day-to-day testing, test results should be available somewhere where developers can review them, project managers can review them, where you get notifications when there's a bug, or potentially your GitHub just refuses to merge a pull request, the ideal case. That has to be available somewhere, but you don't need to document it for your final submission. So there needs to be a different pipeline, effectively, where you pull in the same results for the final release, and just to document that you have been doing all of these tests on it. And this documentation has to be complete. So one of the things you can do is, for example, create a verification item in Matrix that is basically a placeholder with the documentation for what some kind of automated test is doing. You can either automatically populate this via a script based on the test results, or you can manually do it, and you need to attach at least the detailed test reports from your build system, potentially even the source code of your unit tests or the automation tests. But that's the important bit, because later on, if an auditor looks at the test results, he wants to have a complete view, and he doesn't want to ask you to go to the build machine and look at the result for that exact build. But that's all that's interesting to him, because he doesn't care about all the builds that came before this release or after this release, at least not in this moment. So he will want an exact snapshot, and what you can effectively do is just attach a zip file with all of that information, ideally with a quick overview, what it's trying to test and what kind of test it is. But that's basically, in the perspective of Matrix, what's meant by pulling in automated test results. So that's very important. You really don't need those daily results.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Tillman. Just to give a regulatory standpoint, okay, we don't need the daily results into the technical file, in fact, because here, Matrix Req is going to help us generate the technical file that we are going to present to the technical file evaluator, or that will be present in the 510K file, for example. This is okay. What we have there is the technical file. What you mentioned, like the 90 build and the incremental results of automatic testing, for example, we are more on the quality management system side. In fact, that's something that could be audited by a QMS auditor. Okay, coming to your premises and auditing all your processes, and in this case, the design controls. Okay, so then in the design controls audits, then the QMS auditor would be able to review that thing, showing that you actually have an IQ build, showing that you have the incremental testing of your software. But in fact, that remains in your CI/CD. In fact, that remains in your Jenkins, your GitHub, or whatever. Okay, what we want to have in Matrix Req, in fact, is the snapshot, as you said, Tillman, the snapshot of the release. Okay, this is what we need.
Thanks. Okay, so I'll just quickly show a simple way to do effectively a test plan under the assumption that, for example, you want to run tests on a specific area of the product. Let's assume you're making a specific change there. Just to show you a bit what you can do with the traceability. Of course, you could just define a new test run and basically take all of the verification tests. That's the simplest case. You just want to get full coverage. So you select everything in here. Maybe it's organized by folders, then you could select specific areas. But what you can also do, and this is quite relevant if, for example, you do a change, right? So you've done a release, a 1.0 release, which obviously had the full test coverage, but now you're trying to get a patch release out for a specific area of the product. And the important bit here is to, as quickly as possible, retest the areas that are actually affected by the change. One of the things you can do is you can actually use the traceability to find all of the test items that are relevant to you in this case and create a test run from this. So I'm just going to show you how this would work. So again, this is just making use of the fact that you actually do have traceability in here. So there's a query language we support, which can basically do linked searches. So what I'm doing here is I'm picking out a specific folder of the product requirements, only a subset of the folder, the product requirements, and then I'm finding all the verification tests that relate to these via the traceability. So they have an uplink to that product requirement. And this can be, direct, or it can be via several intermediate steps. I'll show you how that works in a second. So if I run this, what I get is this set of verification tests that I want to run. So I'll just select them all. And I'm basically creating a test plan here. So you can see it's created all of these execution items. And these link to verification items. So they're basically the test executions that Cyril just mentioned. And they are based on this transitive linkage to the product requirement. So that's important. I did not select specific verification tests. What I selected were the product requirements. And it's giving me all the test cases that I need for those based on the traceability. And if I take a look here at an example, and I'm just going to use links because this is faster. Sorry, demo effect. Okay, just going to take too long.
Okay, just while Tilma is running the software, you can type in Q&A in the Q&A box if you have questions.
Yeah, and I found it thanks to my link. So basically, this is an example of a verification that is actually not directly linked to a product requirement. So this is a test that was written for a specification, not for a requirement. So it's kind of transitive, but it's still important to run this to cover the product requirement, because obviously there's kind of a fan that expands as you go down the chain. So if each part in the chain has more tests, then they also need to be included. So if I look at this basically links up to a product requirement 204, and it's being included in the test run. So this is the important bit of doing the testing based on traceability, because it helps you to have a sufficient test coverage of everything if you know that you're making specific changes. So on the flip side, it avoids you having to retest everything just because you don't know which parts are actually covered by the tests. So that's an important thing. And then if you look at the test data, I'll just pick some prepared ones because these are really nice. I think that was the second dry run. So this is just an example. But basically, you can see here the information that you're required to add to these systems. So there's a version that you need to document, the tester needs to be documented, the result, obviously. But then you also need to include information that helps you validate the result. So for example, if it's a UI, you need to include screenshots. If it's some data component, then you might need to attach the input data that you used for the testing, but you also want to attach the output results, especially if you found a bug. You might want logs to help the tester later on, the developer, reproduce the errors. So all that kind of thing you need to attach here. And then in the end, in this case, we're using Jira. You also want to link to the bugs that were created to document this defect that you found in the software component. So this is a kind of complete test result that you need to track. And you can use, again, this later on, for example, to see if all of your bugs have been fixed. So if you have the linkage to Jira, what you can do is you can go in and get a report over all the linked Jira items that you have outside of the system that have not been closed yet. So you can do a review when you're trying to get that patch out. You want to make sure that all bugs are fixed. You can use the traceability to make sure that this actually happened. Okay, and then in the end, again, the important thing is that you are able to extract all of that information from the system, because it's nice to have the test coverage in there, etc. But what you want to do is to actually prove, so export the information about these tests, and then you can include whatever is required. So it might just be the metadata like the tester, but you can also do exports with the attachments in case that's needed for a bigger review of the items. And I'll stop it here to have some space for questions.
Thank you, Tillman. So actually we have, I have one question, in fact. Okay, you say that you can have links to external data. Okay, is there a way in Matrix to manage the version of external data that we add, for example, to tests?
That depends on the link. In Jira, there is not necessarily a strict concept of versioning. So that would be the Jira item with its history and comments. But the relevant bit here is what is the work item? And actually, a lot of people use this as kind of a transient link to the code, because the Jira item itself will then be linked to the Git commit that was used to fix the bug. So this kind of gives you even a traceability outside of Matrix. Yes.
Okay, so you can retrieve the traceability to the source code for a change set fixing bugs. Okay, great. Okay, so we have a question from Albert, actually. Okay, we wanted to know what you think about using Jira and Confluence to achieve SAMD and SIMD rec management and testing levels to be compliant to IEC 6204. Perhaps I can give my experience. In fact, perhaps I'm just exaggerating, but I think that Jira and Confluence are one-size-fits-all tools, okay, within which you can do everything you want. In fact, a bit like Excel. Okay, you have an Excel sheet. Of course, you can manage the traceability of requirements and software tests and software test execution. But at some point, it can become very quickly cluttered, in fact. Okay, so this is a bit like this with Jira. Okay, where it can be difficult to define the appropriate model in Jira and Confluence to be able to manage this traceability and also to be able to have a function like the one Tillman showed. For example, being able to identify the impact analysis of changing one item. Okay, we've seen in the demo that one risk had been changed. Okay, and changing this risk, we were able to see how that change on the risk could impact some product requirements and some other items into the model of the demo project. So this is actually, I think, the advantage of Matrix Req, being able to better manage this traceability compared to what we have, okay? And in fact, off the shelf, I would say, compared to what you have with tools like Jira, Confluence, and or even a plain old Excel sheet. Tillman, do you want to add something?
Yeah, not much. I think, I mean, I'm a long-time Jira user, and I think one of the powers of Jira is that you can generate workflows that cover almost everything, and they can be extremely detailed. But there's some parts where it gets really complicated. One of them, for example, is data export. And what's not always obvious is that a big part of the Matrix ALM product is actually the ability to generate these PDF files with lots of customization in it. Same for Excel sheets, and Word docs or HTML. But basically, a lot of work has gone into the export pipeline. And if you try to do this in Jira, you have to do a lot of custom, either you write custom code to take a CSV export and then modify it to generate a report that is good enough to give to an auditor, or you find a plugin. But in the end, yes, you can do it, but you just have to put in a lot of work to customize. And I think that's basically it. The question is, do you want to do that or not? And also the traceability functions, the kind of the linkage search in Jira is not as specific as the one in Matrix. So I think that would be another limitation. You can link a lot, but the type of queries you can do on traceability in Jira is not as powerful.
Okay, thank you, Tilman. So we have another question from Marizette. Do you have a robust API for recording test results generating by custom automated test systems?
I guess I'll take that. Well, it depends on your definition of robust. We have a complete REST API. That's actually the API that our client uses as well. So we know it's functionally complete. And you can use that to you can create the same kind of test executions, also using queries like I did, or using complete folders. And you can fill up the table, do attachments, etc. in those test cases. So there's no reason why you couldn't write, for example, a Python script or Node script that takes a specific test result and then imports that into Matrix. We've also done some test integrations with external testing tools. Zapier, I think, never used it myself. But I think generally, if you're willing to script, then you can definitely import anything you want into the system. We also allow for customization of all of these categories that you've seen. So if you need your own data fields, you can add those to suit your kind of test data that you have.
Okay, thank you, Tilman, for this answer. So we don't have additional question yet. Okay, please feel free to ask your questions if you have some. So I think, yes.
How about pricing? We have basic pricing on our website. We also have the contact details for our sales. If you want more details, I think that would be a bit too much right now for this presentation.
Yes, I think you can follow the link to the Matrix Req website to have more information about pricing.
Yes, you can also just spin up a test instance if you want to try it out yourself.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Tilman. I think we're at the end of this webinar. Thank you for you guys attending this presentation of how to excel in software testing with Matrix Req and the IEC 624. I wish you a pleasant end of day, and also looking forward to seeing you in the next webinar about Matrix Req and the IEC 624. Thank you all, and have a good day.
Thank you, Cyril. Have a good day.